Hey gang, Rod at East Coast Lumberjack, and I've done a series on hanging axes and handles, hafting axes I guess is what people call it. And I got a message on the last one I did saying, hey man, where do your wedges come from? Well, if you've ordered an axe handle from East Coast Lumberjack, you know that I always send a complimentary wedge with my handles. That's probably something different with East Coast from most other places that do handles. So if you order a handle from me, I'll send you a wedge right along with it so you can actually hang your axe yourself. But that's a good question. Where do the wedges come from? So I'm going to show you quite a very easy way to make full use of your wood. At East Coast Lumberjack, there's very little waste. I use every bit of the wood that I have, if not for, I guess at the very end, you can always burn it if nothing else. And I do have a furnace. That's how we heat the house. But there's other things you can do with wood along the way. So I'll show you some of that. What I do, depending on whether I'm using ash or hickory. So this is a typical pattern. This is a 30-inch. I think this is a 30-inch handle here. So as you know, I split my blocks out 36 inches. Actually, this one here is almost 39, so it's a little bit longer. The pattern itself is 30 inches. So I have a 30-inch. This is actually an Aussie racing axe handle pattern that's on this block of wood. But when I look at it, I can see that it's got nice growth rings on the ends. Okay, so this is really nice wood. Actually, the wood I'm into the last little bit is beautiful wood. So it's good tough wood, and it's also going to be nice because it's nice and straight grained. It's going to be good for making wedges as well. So what I'll do, when I'm cutting this off in the bandsaw, I'm going to cut these two ends, and I'll just show you quickly what I do. I'll make it 30 inches. So I turn on my bandsaw, I'll cut off this end. And you can see the end of this, it's really nice grain. Okay, really nice grain in the end of this. So I'm going to leave that here. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with that one. I'm going to take off the other end, make it the length. Okay, same thing. So there's my 30-inch handle, and I'll cut it out on the bandsaw in a minute. But what I want to do is show you how I actually make wedges. So this block is getting close. Now, when you start messing around, come a little closer, honey. I've got my daughter running the camera today, Kate, so bless her heart for doing this. When you start messing around with smaller wood on a bandsaw, I'll shut this off so you can hear me. When you start monkeying around with smaller wood on a bandsaw, it will move on you, especially stuff like this that's rounded. Okay, so see how that'll move on my bandsaw on my table? So what you want to do is find an edge where it's solid before you start cutting with it, because otherwise it's going to flip and you're going to cut yourself. So I'm pretty cautious about that because I use my fingers a lot. They're kind of nice to have on the end of my hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square this up and make it about the length of a wedge. And the wedge is about, whatever, 2.5, 3 inches long. Let me just measure that. So yeah, most of my wedges are 2.5 to 3 inches long. So what I'm going to do is cut, and I do it all by sight now because I've done it for so long. But 3 inches is right here, so I'm going to cut this in 2/3 of this off. So again, we're going to have a flat surface. And I'm going to cut it parallel with this side. The last little piece goes in the burn pile. So now we've got a squared piece on these two sides, but you can see here it flares out on both. So I want to square this up. So again, I set it this way because it's solid. Okay, and then I will cut this end off. And I'll cut this end off. Okay, so now we basically have a square block of wood. Okay, now over to the bench. So with this square block of wood, just come and look right down on it, Kate, if you can, please. What I will do is I will take a straight edge, and I'm going to draw lines on this block of wood that are shaped like a wedge. So one that way. And you want them fairly gradual. You don't want them, I'll measure this here just so you know. So one end comes right to a point. The other end here is 4/10 of an inch. Okay, so that's with those calipers. It's basically a centimeter wide, or if we do it in 16ths, it's 3/8 of an inch wide at the top. So 3/8 or 1 centimeter at this end. The other end is going to come right to a V. Doesn't have to be a perfect V, but it should be close to it. So I'm going to just draw a bunch of these lines. This is what I do on this block of wood. And this is going to give me something to follow. Okay, you just want to make sure you've got basically a centimeter at the end, and then I come right out to this end here. Okay, so this little block of wood is going to give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wedges. So now what I'm going to do is go back to the bandsaw. And because I've squared it up, I've got a nice flat surface here. Okay, so it's going to sit nice and flat so it doesn't tip and rock in your fingers and you wind up cutting your fingers. Okay, so here it is, and I'm just going to cut those off. So Kate, I want you to come right in and look right down so they can see what we're doing. So, I start here. Another piece of wood for the burn pile. And then you're going to start right at the tip. Just going to start it easy. Keep it straight. Okay, so I'm off a little bit, but again, it's not the end of the world. That wedge come out, see it's very, very straight thin, actually right to a point here. And just gradually tapers out. It's got a few ridges in it so it'll hold well. And I'm just going to keep going down through the whole block like this. Okay, and remember I want to bring it to a point, so sometimes I'll leave the line to make sure I come to a point on my wedge. Right? So then this one here again. Don't be in a hurry. Now hold this last one nice and firm with your fingers. Okay. Now, I want to tell you a few things about making wedges, okay? Because it is a tricky little business making wedges. And I wouldn't complain about the $3 or $4 you pay for a wedge because somebody has risked their fingers to make you a wedge. Now, what I have found, so I've got a lot of these blocks. Every time I cut them off, I just throw them in the pile over here. This is a hickory block. Now, when you heard that snapping, what's happening is my block is not sitting perfectly level, and the bandsaw is pulling it down to the table. That's that snap you hear. And sometimes, if it's a big gap, if your block's not cut nice and square, that'll jerk a lot on you, okay? And it'll pull, and sometimes it breaks a blade. And I find it worse with hickory. Hickory is very, very tricky to make wedges out of. Okay, now I'm going to try some hickory wedges here so you guys can see how I do it. Basically, it's the same process as I did for the ash. But again, the blades that I'm using, they have, I think they're 7 point per inch. So it's a little bit more aggressive blade, and it really grabs at hickory wood. So what little snapping you saw in the ash is actually compounded when you do it with hickory, because hickory's a lot tougher wood.